Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to this episode of The Murder Part. Tonight we'll be looking at the case of Ryan Whitmer. We'll start with introductions. Jeff?
My name is Jeff Pincin. I am a licensed mental health counselor in states of Delaware and Pennsylvania, and specialize in the treatment of OCD and other anxiety disorders. Please leave a comment or question. We may respond in future episodes. Now, if I hadn't become a counselor, I wanted to be a crime scene bathtub analyst. Let me try that again. Crime scene bathtub analyst. It turns out this is not really often very necessary. Like, this doesn't happen a lot, that people need bathtubs analyzed in crime scenes. So I had to go with my very much last option, counseling. Shattered dream.
Wow, what a disappointment.
It's a shame because I can think of half a dozen cases off the top of my head where a bathtub was important. Candy Montgomery.
But did they happen in my lifetime?
Jeff Pelly's did. It happened in your lifetime. You were very, very young, but it happened in your lifetime.
All right, I could have maybe started when I was a year older.
What year were you born?
89.
89? Okay, yeah. Candy Montgomery was before.
Yeah.
Before that. So yeah, no, but yeah, there's
some
cases,
precedent.
There's some precedent for it, but yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a high priority thing.
Well, I'll keep trying.
Yeah.
You could have added showers.
Oh, that's
and
true.
Kitchen sinks.
Really built up my clientele.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
You didn't think of that, did you?
Toilets, maybe. Just
branched out to the toilets.
I could have branched the whole bathroom, the whole kitchen.
Branch that, but no, you were specializing in the bathtub.
Right. I was targeting the wrong market.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Should have gone whole, like wet appliances thing. Could have covered wet bars, things like that.
I should have hooked up with a real estate agent or something. Hey, tell me areas of the house that I could investigate, please. Yeah.
What are those things that kids use in the summer, like in the backyard? They slip and slide across the
slip and slide?
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
No, it's appropriately named.
Yeah, you
could
I
add
could
that.
have investigated that.
Inflatable
too.
pools.
You're right. You're right. I
Actual
guess
pools?
anything with water in it.
Yeah, anything with water. Could have. Now you have more opportunities. You might not have to stay as a counselor.
Ooh, now you're talking.
Just have to go back to school for another 20 years. And
Sounds great. I could even do storm drains, maybe. I mean, there's water included there.
Gutters.
Right? Yeah. Gutters.
Mm-hmm.
Right, there you go. Somebody's got to have a need for that somewhere. All right. That's going to be a big business card, I think, but might be worth it. I'll get on it.
What about those super soakers?
No. Okay. So not only with adults in crime scenes necessarily, but with kids. And once I enter into the kid market, I mean, sky's the limit there.
Billion dollar industry.
oh
Easily.
yeah, you could have your parents. I could hire you to make sure that you have evidence that their kid actually did the thing that flooded the basement.
Right. Settle arguments perhaps between siblings. This is going to be big. I'm going to have to start hiring some people. All right. Good ideas.
Mike?
All right, my name is Mike Smith, also a licensed professional counselor in the state of Delaware. I focus on narrative therapy and geek therapy, and I'm a self-styled expert in all things geek. Had I not become a therapist, as a counselor, I think that what I wanted to do at one point in my life was be a drying time expert. There's a lot of water gets into things used in crimes, and it evaporates away. And sometimes you need an expert to be able to say, this was a reasonable drying time. Like, this dried before this time, so we have this. Turns out that as simple an idea as evaporation is, there's just so many variables around it that you can't really pinpoint it. And being an expert in that area, it's just too niche. And so I unfortunately had to step away from that dream and become a counselor.
Sorry to hear that. Hey, listen, Mike, this could be a thing.
I mean, we could partner. You could analyze this
I
stuff
analyze.
and I could tell you how long it's been dry.
Mike, I think we've got it made. I'm in. I'm all in.
Yeah. Or with the family market thing, we say, oh, it's going to take 3 weeks for that to dry. Like, that basement, it's completely flooded. It's going to take 3 weeks.
And then we just walk out. That's all we offer.
That's it. Just analysis. We don't do cleanup.
Right. We don't do any fixes here.
No restoration.
Right.
No.
There's no second step with this business.
You get
It's
a contractor
just,
for that.
You should figure this one out. Good luck. See ya.
And we gave you all the information you need. Take that to a contractor. You'll be fine. We happen to know one. Do you know a contractor?
Nope.
Oh, wow.
That's not my business. I don't know.
We'll have to make some calls. Anyway.
So Ryan Whitmer. This case, there's a book about it, right? I think it was written by a journalist who, I guess, tracked the trial and collected different documents. Pretty good book.
Yeah.
Reasonably good. And
she was there for most of the trials,
the proceedings.
proceedings, and was really following very closely. Yeah.
Yeah, and there have been a few other sources on this. I think this might have been, I know there was an episode of, I think it's called Reasonable Doubt on Discovery Plus that covered this case. I like a lot of the documentaries on Discovery Plus, but I did not like that one. I felt like it was an extremely simplistic approach to a very complex case.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the end, the guy's pretty much like, oh, must have done it. Like, what? Okay.
He sounds like he could have been on one of the juries.
Yeah.
Whoever made that.
Yeah. Dateline did some good did some good coverage of this case. Like they were with it from the door, and they did several episodes where they covered
They
it.
did 11. It was like 11 parts or so. Wasn't
Yeah, something like that. It was a lot. Like they were really with this case.
Yeah, it seems like, it does kind of seem like a simple case, and I can see why somebody might look at it and think, well, I could quickly create a documentary about this without even trying.
Yeah.
But it actually glides on a razor's edge.
Yeah.
This guy could have done it. Maybe he didn't. It's really impossible to know.
Right.
And it's all comes down to just a few minutes around a bathtub.
Mm-hmm.
The entire case.
Or was it a couple of hours around the bathtub?
Right. Right. Yeah. Minutes or hours. But that's
Minutes
it.
or hours.
Right,
Minutes
that's
or
what we're
hours.
talking about. And another one of these cases where there's a alleged homicide and there's no motive.
Yeah.
Usually the backstory, in a lot of cases we see, the backstory fills in the mystery.
Yeah.
Like, a man shoots his wife or something, and then you find out he's got a lover.
Right. Right.
He just took out like $2 million in life insurance.
Lacey Peterson went missing. We find out Scott Peterson had an affair.
Right.
Right. We find out there's nothing like that in this.
No.
There's no $2 million life insurance policy. There's no hidden lover. I mean, although like apparently he was meeting people after the fact.
Right. There's some bad decisions made in prison. Well, I guess was he out? when he
Yeah,
did
it was
that?
before his first trial.
Right. Okay.
A couple of them he met before his first trial.
And then
A couple of them he met after.
Right. Yeah. So some very poor decisions as far as looking innocent, but there was nothing like no angry relatives like, oh, I knew he did it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like that.
I said first trial. Spoiler alert. There's more than one for the same crime. So
Yeah.
3, as a matter of fact.
This case is an adventure, and in terms of like, I think one of the judges even said something like, something to the effect he was tired of the juries getting beat up on, right? Something like that. Like it's not open season on jurors,
Yeah.
and I get that, but these were the worst jurors I think I might have ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're certainly tied for maybe like Michael Morton.
Oh,
Yeah.
Those jurors are pretty bad too.
Oh yeah, they were real bad.
Yeah.
One of the worst things I think was, and we've seen this many times before, looking at the behavior of the individual that's on trial and really heavily weighing that into their decision making. Oh, he looked this certain way, he looked guilty, not guilty, he looked angry, not angry, he looked whatever, and that being a reason that they chose one way or the other or thought one way or the other, which of course is terrible. There's no credibility to that. We know that, and it doesn't take looking at dozens of cases to realize that. But I guess when you're in that jury seat, you're going to be looking at things that, well, I think I have an idea based on how he acted, how he looks.
Right, but jurors do that in a lot of different trials. Like
Right.
Scott
Which is
Peterson
terrible.
did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they showed the autopsy pictures from Rick, he just kind of looked away and looked down,
Right.
didn't look up at them, and the jurors found that meant that he didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
He was aloof and didn't care. Like to me, that indicated like that he just didn't want to look at those photos because they were gruesome and terrible and emotionally impactful. The same kind of thing happened with this one. Like they looked at the way he behaved at certain points and went, "Well, that's suspicious."
Must mean something.
There was a comedian years ago. I'm saying like
There was
70s. Yeah, I mean, they don't exist anymore. But when I was young,
that was a thing.
these comedians were out there, and not just the one from what was that comic that had the comedian and Rorschach, Watchmen.
Watchmen.
Yeah, not just there. There were other comedians that made a living with comedy,
love that
and one was
The comic was great.
I think it was called. It was actually Watchmen was a great movie,
The movie was good too.
underrated movie.
Zack Snyder is a genius.
Yeah, I really liked that. I watched that a few times. But anyway, I think it was called The Unnamed Comic or something. He wore a bag over his head. not a plastic bag, but a
Right.
Yeah, paper bag.
paper bag. Plastic would not be safe. Yeah. And he had these holes. I was thinking, if somebody like that ever got accused of a crime, how are you going to read the bag? Just there in
that's
court
fair.
with the...
Oh, he's got a bag on his head. Must be guilty.
Get the bag off your head. I can't, Your Honor. It's surgically implanted there. I cannot
Must be
remove the
guilty. He refuses to move the bag.
I think the pandemic might have given some defendants an advantage with the mask thing.
True.
Like, who knows?
bag. Either that or a whole bunch of them, just like people in the. He's wearing a mask. I don't trust that guy. He's wearing a mask. You see that? He's wearing a mask.
Look at his eyes. They're shifty. So, yeah, either way. So, yeah, the juries were terrible. And there's no getting around it.
Juries the world over are terrible.
It's amazing. I mean, the founding fathers of the United States, I think they believed it was a good idea to have members of the public, kind of group together and try these cases, decide these cases. And I think they were right, but I feel like there is a piece missing because sometimes these juries just run off with body language nonsense and conspiracy theories and gut feelings, and they can start passing that around, and it becomes like a groupthink.
Right. Right.
And then they come up with these verdicts that just I almost feel like there needs to be like a representative of common sense kind of in the room, but that would defeat the original vision the founding fathers had.
Right.
I mean, the alternative was some of the things they used to do, and I was like the nobility oversaw the thing. Just had like a bunch of aristocrats looking down at peasants, being like, "No, they're guilty," like whether they did or not. Like, just like, oh, yeah, send them off to jail.
They were trying to prevent one evil by introducing a lesser evil.
Or like the power of the magistrates had. Like they were just like one magistrate in the entire area just oversees everything. No jury, no nothing. The magistrate thinks you're guilty, and you go to to prison or worse.
I think it is telling, though, that when someone is actually not guilty, they're more likely to select trial by bench, like trial by judge, bench trial. We saw that with Garrett Phillips, another interesting case that has an HBO documentary on it, where Nick Hillary, the guy who was accused, there wasn't much of a case. Went to bench trial, not guilty.
Yeah.
Whereas if he went with jury, who knows what they would have come up with?
Yeah. Right. Right.
So, like,
The judges aren't always the best of choices. Bench trial is not always the best choice.
No.
As I've seen some people who like really look not guilty when a bench trial were found guilty by the judge.
yeah. Well, the danger with the judges, they know all the excluded evidence, and they say they partition, and they probably try to,
Right.
but it's especially if it's like DNA that was thrown out or something.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
how
hard
could
to-
you look past that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one where I think that before a judge hears a bench trial, they should have another judge go over do the evidentiary stuff so that the judge hearing it doesn't have access to all that excluded evidence. Like the judge, we're going to exclude that evidence, so I'm not going to consider it. Man, that's some powerful evidence.
That's some good evidence.
Damn,
I
good
wish I
evidence.
could just include
Wish I
that
could include
evidence.
that. Man, that really points right to guilt. And I'm not going to let that sway me. I'm not going to let that.
Right. I mean, I think this is obviously there's people involved, so it's going to be there's going to be something messed up about it at some point, right? And now that just about everything is video recorded, maybe that helps in these situations. Obviously it's going to not help everybody.
You mean everything's video recorded?
Pretty much.
I'm not comfortable in front of
Pretty
cameras,
much.
man.
Right. Well, good. All right, great. You're in the right place. But maybe that'll just ultimately help, that if there's some video somebody can find somewhere, it helps to just figure something out that otherwise nobody would have any idea about. But of course, that wouldn't help a situation like this where you're in a bathroom where nobody's going to be recording anything and there's serious doubt about what actually happened.
Yeah. Well, we've been pussyfooting around what happened.
Let's hear
I
your
guess we'll
background.
get
on
into
this.
that then. So two people are the main part of this story. Ryan and Sarah Widmer. Now they had only been married a short amount. I forget 100 and something
4
days.
months or something?
Yeah, 4 months. They said how many days? 100 something days. Got married April 19th, 2008. So on August 11th, 2008, Ryan called 911, said, "My wife fell asleep in the bathtub and I think she is dead." Now, of course, the court, the lawyers, the jury would pick apart that statement, but nonetheless called 911 and said that. She had drowned in the bathtub. The autopsy would say that. And different people said that it was homicide. Different people said that it was not. Of course, there was 3 trials that culminated in many different things. And so ultimately, unfortunately, Sarah did pass away. Ryan, of course, maintains his innocence. The prosecution has said that he intentionally drowned her, or that he accidentally drowned her, or he did something to cause her death. There were different stories about maybe he drowned her in the toilet, maybe he drowned her in the sink, maybe it was the bathtub, maybe it was something else. But ultimately, there were no defense wounds, no injuries to Ryan, no injuries of any kind other than what was probably caused by the life-saving efforts by the paramedics that came. So there's a lot of doubt in this case, of course. So he had his first trial in 2009. He was convicted and sent to prison, but it was later overturned because of jury misconduct.
We got to be clear here, because he was acquitted of the biggest charge.
Right.
He was acquitted of first-degree murder, but he was convicted of the second degree.
Yeah.
The jurors in the first trial didn't believe that he premeditated anything. They thought that if it was going to be if anything, it was an act of passion or a momentary disturbance or an argument or something that led to this happening. So he was acquitted of the first degree.
Right. But convicted of the second.
Convicted of the second.
But ultimately, it was overturned. Many of the jurors had conducted their own drying experiments and shared those results with other jurors. You could have come in there, Mike.
I could have testified on that. That was during my lifetime too, and I was an adult.
You could have saved the day.
I could have.
So then, second trial in 2010 returned no verdict, as they could not agree, and they doubted that any jury could come to any kind of consensus.
What I think was most interesting about that was when his first trial was overturned, the judge who decided to overturn it because of the juror misconduct said that the acquittal stands. The acquittal of the first degree murder stands. Like, the prosecutors would not be allowed to retry him for that because double jeopardy. He said, like, that's going to stand, even though it's a mistrial. Like, another judge, I think, could have thrown the whole thing out. And acquittal and everything, gone. The whole thing's a mistrial. But this one said no. The jury made a decision on that, and I don't think that it's that they made a mistake with that. So that's going to stand. We're not going to try him again for an acquittal, but we'll allow them to retry on the second degree murder.
Yeah, good point. So then, third trial took place in 2011. He was again convicted of murder and sentenced to 15 years to life, with the possibility of parole in 2025. So a lot of details with this, but those were the main facts of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as we make this, he's in prison. And there's a lot of people that support him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's really many people who think he's guilty, which is just kind of a weird situation. He's sitting in prison, and there's this whole, we'll get to the controversy with the face up, face down, and all this. Different reports he said, like in terms of finding their body, as an inconsistency, but really there's not much evidence in this case outside of his wife drowned, and she was in the bathroom when first responders arrived. He was there too. There's just not a lot of pieces, and he doesn't really look guilty. We'll talk about.
It's like, really, this case boils down to evidence by absence of evidence. Like, even with the autopsy results, drowning is a diagnosis by exclusion. You have to exclude every other cause before you can say it was drowning. Because just because there's water in the lungs doesn't mean the person drowned. You have to prove that it wasn't strangulation or that they didn't die of an aneurysm and then fall in the water, because water gets everywhere. It can fill in. So it's not just like, oh, yeah, there was water in the lungs. She must have drowned. Maybe she was dead before she went in the water.
Well, the medical mystery was another defense strategy. I looked up some data on this. Apparently, sometimes people do die, and there's absolutely no theory or explanation at all.
Yeah, I think one of the experts said it's like something like 3% of deaths of people around the age category that she was. Completely unexplained and unexplainable. They have no idea what killed them.
Well, enough for reasonable doubt. Maybe not, but it piles in and can add on to these other factors. So let's take a look at these two. So this was a young couple. Ryan, 27, Sarah, 24. They were in a house. I think they might have had a dog. They have a dog?
I don't know.
I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they had a dog.
Yeah. But other than that, there was no one else in the house.
Right.
And of course, as usual, dog's not saying anything.
Except bark.
What a jerk.
Yeah, he's talking
Unbelievable.
He's talking about how rough it is around here. Maybe trying to tout up the new woofers they've got for the sound system, but he's not talking about the murder or the death at all.
I just can't believe, though. I mean, another dog that just won't talk. I mean,
Seems to be a chronic thing, right? Chronic
talking
problem.
about
I mean,
misserved justice here.
investigators who go asking for dogs are just barking up the wrong tree.
I can't think of any right now. You got them all, Mike.
So it's just these two young people in the house, right? So, and of course, one was no longer alive. Ryan calls 911 at 10:49 p.m. Talks about his wife falling asleep. So already he's theorizing.
Right.
You got to be very careful what you tell 911.
Right.
I almost think the people who say "come quick," scream, and then hang up they're in the best place.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing really.
No details were given. Nothing for people to pick apart. I'm sure they could.
Right.
Oh, you screamed the wrong way, or something.
It's a loophole for Fifth Amendment.
Yeah.
Right. If you think about it, like, you're expected to call for help, or that makes you look guilty. When you do call for help, they're playing that recording.
And could make you look guilty.
Right. Yeah. They're using your own words against you, which you're not supposed to be able to do. Some criminals will run to a neighbor's house and be like, call the police. It looks suspicious, but in a way it's kind of a good tactic because you remove the entire kind of breach of the Fifth Amendment there.
Yeah.
There's no testimony against yourself.
Yeah.
Let the neighbor handle that.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll look guilty.
Well, because then, sometimes I think we've seen it before. They'll be like, well, why'd you run to the neighbor's house? You must be guilty because you had to get away from the scene. You tried to remove yourself from the scene or something. I mean, I could understand a lawyer trying to use every angle. Of course, that's the lawyer's job. But there's got to be something that's off limits, right? Like you said, using their own words against them just in a cry for help.
Yeah, you have to really have the correct emotions.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
Right.
So during the course of the call, so you have, Ryan's on the phone and help is on the way. And we see this kind of intersection between the two. The dispatcher told Ryan to lift his wife out of the bathtub and administer CPR. Now, he told him initially, I think something like it was face down.
She was face down. But
later he said face up.
Right.
That becomes an inconsistency. I don't think it's really a big deal, but considering the stress he was under, but okay. I mean, he just said the wrong word, maybe. Said down, said up. Later, Ryan said he drained the bathtub and pulled Sarah up, but didn't lift her out until the dispatcher said something.
Right.
This also became a huge deal.
Right.
How dare you leave her in the bathtub? Nobody would do that.
Somebody was trying to follow directions and was very scared, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, does it look a little suspicious?
Sure.
Maybe, but it's not like this is there's some protocol out there. Like, everybody in this situation knows you pull them out of the tub.
Everyone automatically does it because this is instinct for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was used against him. First responders, they arrived in 6.5 minutes, about that. So pretty quickly. Sarah was unresponsive on the floor next to the bathtub. And of course, like, the amount of water around her became a big issue.
Right.
She was pronounced dead at 11:41 after being transported to the hospital. She drowned, like, as we talked about, that was the cause of death. And there was some injuries on her that came up later, but they may have been caused from moving her around with the CPR.
Right. There were some experts that said one thing. Some of them said that they might have been consistent with somebody choking Sarah or something like that. But then other ones that it seemed were more credible, were of the opinion that they were caused by the life-saving measures. And it seemed to be more evidence, at least from what I heard, that it was probably from the life-saving measures. And that seemed to carry more credibility throughout all three trials, at least to me.
Yeah. I mean, one of the experts said, like, no, that wasn't from the life-saving efforts because it would be down further. Mm-hmm. You do CPR over the sternum, and those injuries would be here, but they were further up, closer to the throat, so they wouldn't be consistent with that. But another expert said, yeah, that's a typical thing that I see with people who are amateurs at CPR who try to do it.
Right.
Like maybe a construction worker or contractor who doesn't regularly do CPR, who's trying to resuscitate his wife.
Or someone who works in sports marketing. Someone who's not very experienced with that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they didn't have much to go on, and they really latched on to small things, and that's what we see. Kind of like is literally drops of water became.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Seriously, I personally think that this case wouldn't have gone anywhere if one of the responding officers hadn't got a bug up their rear end about it's not wet enough in here.
Yeah.
And he walked in, and in the Dateline episode, they have numerous times interviews with him. He always comes back to the same thing. It just there wasn't water anywhere. This is there wasn't water anywhere. I knew it wasn't that this was a murder. Like he immediately walked in the room and said, "This is a murder," because there wasn't water everywhere.
If Ryan had just taken his hands, splashed some water out, none of this would have happened.
Yeah.
But he told the 911 dispatcher that he opened the drain and the water was draining out before the dispatcher even told her to take her out of the bathtub.
Mm-hmm. A big deal was made over her drowning, based on falling asleep. Right. This is largely considered impossible, unless you have substances in your system like Whitney Houston.
Sure.
Right? She was on something or a combination of things, and she rendered herself unconscious in a bathtub and slipped under the water at 50, I believe. Sarah, they determined she definitely did not fall asleep and drown. It's like 1 in a million or something, 1 in 100 million. Like it'd be very unlikely.
Right.
Technically, anything's possible, but they determined that definitely didn't happen. She had no substances in her system at all.
But there are other conditions that could mimic that kind of like narcolepsy. Some instances of narcolepsy, the sleep is incredibly deep really quickly. Right? People have died. Some people aren't even allowed to drive a car because of the narcolepsy is so bad. Because they can fall asleep literally anytime, anywhere, and just poof, they're out.
Yeah.
And there have been people who have suffered major injuries because they fell asleep. And those things can cause, it's a disruption in the brain. It's not substance induced, but it could be a problem neurologically that could cause that to happen. Very similar to what I mean, but it wouldn't be as easily seen.
I've actually, in clinical settings, seen people with narcolepsy, and you could be talking to them 1 minute and turn to do some paperwork or look out the window or anything, and you look back and they're asleep. Like it is very quick, and it's a little bit of work to wake them up.
I had an uncle who had narcolepsy, and I had clients in an inpatient setting. One of them had narcolepsy, and the one in the inpatient setting, he's like, okay, I'm going to do this paperwork. Like I'm going to. Like, you okay? He's like, huh? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just doing this paperwork. And he's in the middle of a sentence, just he's out.
Yeah, it's not just like a little sleepy. Like it's distinct from just being tired.
And there are grades of narcolepsy as well that some people just feel really tired all the time, and if given an opportunity, they're out, but they have a little bit more control over it. And others, the narcolepsy is just like they have to wear a helmet because if they're walking down the street, they might face plant.
I was looking on the freeryanwhitmer.org is still up. Like it's still active and everything. And there's a change.org petition on there. And, well, there's two of them, actually. One is for that Ohio County to release the DNA, Sarah's DNA, so they can do testing on it. And it was interesting what they said here, because they're talking about these conditions, possible conditions that she had. And to their knowledge, it says, to our knowledge, no tests have done that could have ruled out several conditions that Ryan's lawyers suspected. Most notably, and I think this is very interesting. I didn't hear this anywhere else. Most notably, Sarah walked abnormally at times, including the night she died. Several medical resources say that could be linked to neurological or other conditions. In addition, Sarah had abnormally low-set ears, an unusually small lower jaw, short stature, and excessive daytime sleepiness. All of these conditions could have been indicative of certain disorders such as long QT syndrome type 7. So if they can analyze that, apparently they might be able to show if she might have suffered from something like that. But it's an interesting thing because, of course, these were, to my knowledge, never explored. There was some indication that maybe she suffered from something that was undiagnosed, unknown, and couldn't have been told by the autopsy. But it's an interesting thing. I mean, obviously, this would be a great idea. Analyze the DNA or figure out if they can find something. But the terrible part about this is that they have to go to the public and try to get the courts or the government or whomever to try to do these things, as opposed to just, hey, maybe we should actually figure this out. Maybe an innocent man is in prison.
Prosecutors are notoriously bad about that, with blocking those kinds of things. We saw that in Michael Morton case. They didn't want to, like the prosecutors and that, the disciple of the prosecutor in that case didn't even want to do the DNA. He was like, oh, no, we got it right. Mm-hmm. No, we got it right. There was another case in the early 80s of a woman. I cannot remember her name off the top of my head, but she had a child who died, and then her second child was born a couple shortly after that. But the baby who died, the physician said, this looks like ethylene glycol poisoning. This looks bad. Like this baby was poisoned. And so prosecutors jumped on it, and they ended up pushing her to a conviction. She was jailed, had her second child taken, and then her second child started showing signs of a similar illness. And then at one point, that baby started getting really, really ill, and they wanted to charge her with assault on that child too, even though she didn't have custody of him. Mm-hmm. And she ended up being convicted of the murder of her first child. Unsolved Mysteries covered this, and a physician in a different state called in and said, I've heard of stuff like this. It's this particular disease, like MDMA is what the acronym, I don't remember what it stands for, but it's a disorder where the body actually produces some of the chemicals that are similar to ethylene glycol and causes a reaction. Mm-hmm. And this physician was like, all we have to do is test the dead baby's remains, and we can determine if that child had this particular disorder. Right. We don't even have to go that far. We can actually test the living baby and see if that baby has it, because it's genetic. It's been inherited from the parents. Mm-hmm. If this baby has it, it's likely the other one did too. Prosecutors were like, no, we're not going to do that. Yeah. We're not going to do that at all. Like, it had to go to a judge who finally said, yes, examine the remains and test it. At least test it. Once they tested and found the markers, the prosecutors were like, we're dropping all the charges, releasing her. And
yeah, there's a big thing for prosecutors where they believe in finality. Yeah. And they do it, they say they do it because, it gives the family peace. Mm-hmm. But one would think that the family, peace would be knowing the right person's in prison.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Michael Morton's, his wife's family, they were at peace for 25 years when he was the wrong person convicted. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That caused a lot more psychological issues for the family after he was exonerated.
Well, and the real killer killed another woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Michael Morton case is still one of those that was just a frightening combination of police incompetence and really sadism.
Right.
That Boutwell guy, the Sheriff Boutwell, what? I think he's dead now, but during his career, he did a lot of damage. Mm-hmm. A lot of damage.
Oh, absolutely.
His claim to fame was it the Texas sniper? He flew an airplane, and drew the fire of the Texas sniper. Charles Whitmer, I think it was. Not Widmer. I think it's Whitmer, something like that.
Whitmer, I think.
So, yeah, something like that, yeah. That's another incredible case that we could look at.
Yeah.
A dramatic ending and unexpected ending. So let's look at the factors that kind of weigh in against Ryan Whitmer. So when the first responders arrived, Sarah's hair was described as wet or damp, depending on who you talk to, but her body was described as rather dry. I like this. Not overly moist.
Right.
That's a word you got to be careful with, apparently.
Moist.
There are a lot of people who don't like the word moist.
Right. You're right.
Yeah. It's considered like it I guess it evokes some type of feeling of disgust in people.
Yeah. It's almost one that you can feel that feeling just by saying the word. You hear moist, and people are like, "Oh, I kind of feel that on myself," you know. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't like feeling that way. Like if on my skin when I'm not like coming out of a pool or something. But you know what? I like a nice moist piece of cake.
There you go. Yeah.
If it's too dry, like that cake is too dry, it's awful.
Yeah. You're right.
But would you want it to be not overly moist?
No, I wouldn't want it to be wet.
Yeah. You're okay. So you wouldn't want it to be not. You don't want it to be overly moist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
But apparently, Sarah Whitmer's body wasn't overly moist.
Right.
Yes, it was not overly moist.
Yeah, I don't know, like, what is the quality there? Like, what does that exactly mean?
It's a scientific description.
The other description was like her hair was damp.
Yeah.
What is damp?
Or wet.
Damp
Wet or damp?
wet.
Wet or damp? But how was there? Was it saturated with water? Not saturated with water? Was it dry on the outside? But if you put your hands in there, you really feel it. Like,
should they have given it a scale, like 1 being not wet at all, 10 being the most wet?
that probably would have been helpful.
But then somebody would be like, wait a minute, I think of 10 differently. Or I think of 1 different. I would think of 5 differently.
Well, no, you have the rate as dry is dry, right? There's no moisture on it at all. It's not moist in the slightest. And then wet is like submerged in water right now. It is wet. Like that's 1 to 10. And then you get inter-rater reliability going on there, where you have multiple people, look at and then feel the thing and then give their rating on what they think it is.
I feel like no matter what, there was no right answer there. Like they tried to describe it, of course, but I just there's no reliability there of like someone's opinion of how wet the body is or how not wet the body is.
Well, that one responding officer was saying like she was completely dry.
Yeah.
Like dry.
Right. Not overly moist, just dry.
Huh.
That's what I'm saying. This again adds to some reasonable doubt for me. Like there's no consensus there. And you don't actually know how long she had actually been out of the bathtub and the drying rate and all that. Yeah.
Do you remember
that's why you need me as an expert, but
A Few Good Men? You see that movie?
I haven't.
It had Kevin Bacon and I think Tom Cruise, Demi Moore, and Jack Nicholson. It was like an all-star.
Yeah.
oh yeah.
And there's another guy too who played an attorney. He was a good actor. Can't remember his name. He'll come to me. But there's a big climactic scene. Spoiler alert for A Few Good Men. It was based on a book. The book had a different ending, like a little bit.
Oh, Kiefer Sutherland was in it.
Yeah, because Kiefer Sutherland.
That's not who I was thinking though. There was another.
Kevin Pollak.
Yes, Kevin Pollak. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, he had a smaller role, but still important. So anyway, this final scene, Jack Nicholson is being questioned on the stand by Tom Cruise. It's a military. I think they were Marines.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Marines.
And
Nicholson was a Marine general, and technically, the lawyers were all Navy because they were with JAG.
Right. Yeah, but the defendant, or actually, he was just being questioned at that point. He wasn't defending.
He wasn't defending. He was just being questioned.
He was testifying on another trial of 2 people that served under him, who allegedly committed kind of a second-degree murder type thing. Whatever, I don't know what they call it in the thing. But either way,
in the movie, there was a code red.
Right.
It was like there was supposed to be a unofficial disciplinary action that ended up with a Marine dying. And these two men were on trial for it.
Yeah, so at one point, Tom Cruise said something, and Nicholson was talking about danger, right? Were they in danger? Were they in grave danger? I think Tom Cruise said. And Nicholson said, "Is there any other kind?" It was like a big. It was a good line, because the way he's a good actor, Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson, great actor.
And the way he delivered that line and a few other lines in that final scene was superb. But I can picture like an argument in Widmer's trial. Like, was it moist? Was it not overly moist? Is there any other kind?
Any other kind of moist? Yeah, there's really moist.
Describe other moist.
There's
to
extra
me.
moist.
Right.
Yeah.
Cuba Gooding Jr. was in the movie as well.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it really was an all-star cast.
Yeah, really. Yeah. So anyway, I think that was just subjective, and I don't really think it added anything to it. Of course, they really had to dissect that, though, obviously, because it was important. But I don't. If they had known the kind of weight that not overly moist, how heavily that weighed on the trial, could they have done something different? Probably.
Yeah, well, it differentiated her body from her hair.
Yeah.
Right, and that was the whole thing. In terms of like the wetness status.
They were trying to say like her body was dry, but her hair was still wet. It was still damp. So obviously she'd been out of the water for a lot longer than she was in the water.
Yeah.
Or than he had said she was. But he said like he was draining the water out like a minute into the phone call, the 911 call. It was when he made the statement, the water's draining out now. He'd been draining out. And if he pulled that plug, like as soon as he saw that and the water was draining out, by the time it got to him, it was probably down fairly low. Evaporation started immediately. And whatever, if she was laying on her side, face down or face up, like whatever, but on her side, this part that was above the water line was going to be dry no matter what.
Right.
But that stuff drained out. And then the call ended 4.5 minutes later. But he stopped talking 4.5 minutes later. The whole phone call was like 7 minutes on his cell phone,
right,
or his phone record.
Now, he specifically mentioned to the dispatcher that he was downstairs before coming upstairs and finding his wife. This is another move that looks suspicious, kind of like the saying how they died. Looks suspicious. Saying, "Oh, I just came home." That's what a lot of killers do. "I just came home. I was out somewhere not killing anybody. Definitely not killing anybody. Did I mention that? And I walked in.
Completely innocent.
Again, from out not killing anybody. And I found this person in my house dead."
Yeah.
One more thing I want to add, Mr. Dispatcher or Mrs. Dispatcher. I was not killing anybody when I was out.
Have I mentioned
I was not at home. I was not at home killing anyone. I was out not killing anyone else.
I was out at a completely innocent bar.
It was a murder-free place. There was no murder allowed.
There were no deaths that occurred where I was at the time that I was there. I can't tell you exactly where that was or when that was, but there were no murders that took place when I was there, and I was there.
The name of the bar was No Murders Allowed. There were signs posted everywhere. I couldn't have done it even if I wanted to.
It's like I was watching Only Murders in This Hotel. No, wait, that was the wrong.
I was watching Only Murders in My House. No, not my house. Not my house.
The hotel. That's the name of the show, right? I was watching Murder House Flippers. I mean,
I'm making it worse. I need to stop talking.
I think sometimes people just need to stop talking, but there are a lot of times when people get into heavy anxiety or adrenaline-fueled things, they just info dump. Everything, like everything they see. They're like, the walls are white in this room. I'm in this white room, and there's like there's brown panels behind me. I'm like, wait, I don't need to know that. But calm down. What are you doing? But I'm just telling you where I am. I've heard other 911 calls like that. But the 911 operator that received this call testified at the trial and said he gave too much information.
Yeah.
He's like, I've had many calls and I've never gotten one that had that much information.
Everybody's an expert in these murder trials.
Yeah. Like, how long have you been working 911? Because, I mean, I haven't never worked 911, but I've watched enough 2020s and Datelines to have heard a lot of 911 tapes, and I've heard a lot of people give a lot more information than he did.
Yeah, a lot of innocent people.
Yeah, straight up innocent people.
Yeah. Now, that dispatcher said in the book had some issues as well. there's things that came out in the training about I think it was a woman, if I remember correctly, right? The dispatcher.
I think it was a man.
Was it a man? That he would fall asleep during his shifts, or there'd be periods of where he just wouldn't say anything during the calls or something along those lines. So there was some issues. I don't remember the book saying if that came up in the trial at all, but it might have been an after the fact kind of thing. I don't remember the exact details of that, if you guys do.
No, it gives you an idea of the granular detail.
Right.
They were searching for anything,
Right.
both sides. So Ryan told the police that he was watching a Bengals preseason game on the downstairs television, but the police discovered when they turned it on, it was on a different channel. The upstairs TV was set to the Bengals preseason game, whatever channel that was on.
Right.
He explained that he was switching back and forth to check the Olympic Games. It was Michael Phelps who was swimming, and he was interested in that. I mean, that was pretty incredible Olympics.
Yeah. Right.
Michael Phelps.
And he was obviously very much into sports. That was kind of his whole career,
Occupation.
much of his whole life too.
Whatever that is, whatever sports marketing, I'm sure it's a legitimate thing, but it's just not something you hear of that much. Like,
Right.
what do you do? You market
Somebody's
the
got to
sports?
market it. Yeah.
Like, so the sports come to you and you're like, let's go market. Like, I don't know.
It's more along the lines of trying to figure out what's the type of materials that we can sell with this sports team,
Like jerseys and hats. And
Like, how can we get the jerseys over there for this place, or how we can manufacture the cups for this? Oh, we got beer cozies. I'm gonna get those thrown out. I think the most exciting part of that would be figuring out where you're going to store the T-shirt cannons.
Was it Maude in The Simpsons? Yeah. Wasn't she?
Maude Flanders, she was killed by a T-shirt cannon. Yeah,
She was knocked off of the back of like bleachers.
It was at a auto racing track, and they were up in the nosebleed sections all the way in the back. And Homer was screaming like, "Give me a T-shirt!" And they fired the T-shirt cannon. He's like, "Ooh, Penny!" And he leaned down just as she was coming back with the hot dogs. And she got hit with it and went over the back.
Yeah, that was a great episode. But Maude was Ned Flanders' wife, and then later
his first wife.
Later he marries again. And I think she's
Edna Krabappel. Yeah,
which is spelled crabapple.
Crabapple. Yeah. I've been calling her Crandall.
Yes, those T-shirt cans. You gotta be careful.
Yeah, you do. But those things are awesome, and if you're in sports marketing, you might know where they keep them.
You might have access to them for the weekends, maybe.
Them. Yeah. Which begs the question: if you're going to kill your wife, why not use a T-shirt cannon? Just saying.
I guess that is the only way to go out, isn't it?
Right. I mean, if you're going to go out, you might as well go out and
with a T-shirt.
You just load it up with a T-shirt that says "I killed my wife."
There you go.
And fire it off.
That's it. Is the only way to do it. You're right. But nonetheless, they didn't find any T-shirt cannons in the bathroom.
There's no
or
T-shirt
in the house.
cannons in the house.
Right.
There's no evidence the T-shirt cannon was ever in the house.
Which is unfortunate.
I mean, I'm sure there were T-shirts, but they didn't seem to have come from a T-shirt cannon.
Also unfortunate.
There was no "I killed my wife" T-shirt. They didn't find that.
Right, no.
Yeah, that's always a good clue for the prosecution.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you find that "I killed my wife" T-shirt, like, you definitely...
Defendant's like, why do I keep buying these
Why do
things?
I keep this? How many of those have you bought? Well, I've only been married 4 times, so I've only got 3 of these shirts. Oh, wait, I need to order a new one. Oh, crap.
I didn't mean that.
I didn't mean that.
But in this trial, they probably would have analyzed the font and been like, well, this is the wrong font for the confession. This can't be right. Yeah.
So this was the marks on the tub. This was fascinating to me. Talk about finding evidence where there just isn't anything.
Oh, yeah.
They found 2 types of marks on the bathtub. One was a set of what they described as claw marks.
Yeah.
Even though nobody had claws there. I mean, again, the dog. Has anybody questioned the dog?
That's true. There you go.
No, maybe the dog was one who drowned her. I don't know.
So the idea was his fingers ran across the bathtub and made these streaks that, if I remember right, were 1/8. I think they said they were 1/8 inch apart and 1/8 inch thick. I'm thinking of the right case, which is pretty narrow.
Yeah.
Like 1/8 inch.
Yeah.
That's
What it sounds like to me is that her hand ran across it as she was being lifted up out of the tub.
yeah. Well, they're thinking like she's clawing at the sides to.
As a defense mechanism or something.
Yeah, I don't know if those measurements can be right. 1/8. That seems.
No, I don't even know how you could get your fingers that close together.
Yeah, I don't know what. Maybe it's a different case, but I thought that's what the book said.
Well, she was a person of very short stature, very small hands. My hands are huge, so
But even
I
still,
can't even really like.
I mean, that would be near impossible. It's just, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. We don't even know if they're the right
Like I
measurements.
don't think any surface on any of my fingers an eighth of an inch.
Yeah. Even someone who's smaller, I don't think that's possible. But who knows if they're right?
Yeah. Well, I don't think it was actually from people's hands, so maybe that's why. Or maybe I have the measurements wrong. But either way, the other one was a forearm print on the edge of the bathtub. So if somebody like put their forearm down, murdering someone, or just getting out of the tub.
Getting out of the tub, or
Daily
like
use of the
using
tub.
it to leverage a body out of a tub of somebody, a loved one or something, or just the arm of the person who's unconscious hit the tub on the way out and their fingers dragged on. Like it really is evidence of nothing.
Yeah, it's a stretch. But then there was the Lysol towelette. Now this wasn't a towel. This was a towelette.
Right. Don't get it confused. Not a full size.
Not quite a flushable wipe, but similar in nature.
Now, if he had used a flushable wipe, they probably would have gotten him on like, oh, you're trying to destroy your septic system. Oh no, now he's a murderer. That's probably what it would happen.
So it was crumpled on the ledge of the bathtub. I like the way they word this, as if someone was trying to clean up the area. Who would dare clean their bathroom?
Who would clean a bathtub?
It's just ridiculous.
A
You don't clean
murderer
those
would,
things.
obviously.
Or a person who wants to take a bath in a clean bathtub.
Right. That's
I think only murderers
Either
do
or.
it.
Only murderers clean their bathtubs.
Personally, that's always been my opinion about
Wow,
life.
I wonder how many people my mother's killed. She cleans her bathtub every time she uses it. You think she's murdering someone every time she takes a bath?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, okay.
Definitely.
Wow.
Yeah. No,
That's a lot of people.
you better check the backyard, Mike.
Oh, she's got 13 acres too.
Well, that's why she has 13 acres.
Yes. So then we see that Ryan told the dispatcher that his wife was face down in the water. Mm-hmm. We talked about that. That was a big deal. He changed his story when he said face up. Found her face up.
Yeah.
He drank 4 beers. This was interesting too, where the jury went with this. He drank 4 beers the night of Sarah's death, and maybe this made him disinhibited. Like he drank a few beers and like, you know what? Killing seems like a good idea. But there was jurors that looked at him like, there's no way it was just 4 beers.
I remember the last time I had like 4 drinks in a night, and I definitely wanted to go out and kill somebody. Like that was definitely the first thought that came into my head.
Well, after you clean
as soon as the 4th drink hit, I was just like, murder sounds fun.
After you clean the bathtub?
Well,
Then you went out
No,
to
see, I didn't clean a bathtub because I didn't actually go out and kill anybody. But it was just the thoughts.
Just thought.
Like, I thought about cleaning the bathtub, but I didn't.
Right.
So I'm like,
That makes sense. Yeah. I think the worst part about this is that they removed the tub from the bathroom
brought it
as
into court.
evidence. I guess they determined they couldn't get photo evidence enough to really drive their point home. Whole bathtub, which, I mean, is just over the top.
which was terrible because in the 3rd trial, they took the jurors to the house so they could see the actual bathroom. But the bathtub that happened had already been ripped out and replaced with something else.
Yeah, they probably just should have thought about this as far as like a field trip. But I guess something has to happen with the house.
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
Can't be. I mean, Murder House Flippers comes right in.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be sold.
Well, at some point, Ryan couldn't pay, and the house got foreclosed on or something, and had to go to somebody else.
Taking like Murder House Flippers doesn't come in at that point because there's nobody convicted of the murder. We would wait until after the conviction.
That's right.
So that we can tout that. We got to tout the murder. At that point, it could have been an accident.
Yeah.
And there's no market for accident house flippers.
Yeah.
That's going to be the sequel to the show. But
That's a whole different industry.
Whole different
Free
It's silly to
trial.
even compare it to Murder House Flippers.
Pre-trial house flippers, right?
Pre-trial house flippers. That way we keep it kind of in a loop. There's like the pre-trial house flippers and then the post-conviction house flippers. And then we get into murder house flippers once we determine it's murder. Yeah.
And then we get into 2nd trial house flippers, 3rd trial house flippers, everything.
Right. Mistrial house flippers.
Mistrials.
Talk about like
There's a murder in this house, but it got a mistrial, so now it might be an accident.
it's like somebody's desperate for a sequel idea. put a show like, we have this successful show. What else can we do?
Right.
How about out on parole, house flippers?
Somebody's telling us that's a great idea up there.
Yeah, dogs agree.
Yeah. See, when you get the thumbs up approval from Bella, it's a golden idea.
If you get a thumbs up approval from a dog, you're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, and you have a great dog.
Right.
You get thumbs.
Very capable dog. But I can only imagine what it was like, them wheeling this bathtub into the courtroom. Like, hey, check out this evidence.
You
Here's
guys
a
want to take a
bathtub.
bath?
Right. Here's your bathtub.
Except
And-
it's really dirty right now because we got all this fingerprint dust all
oh,
over
yeah,
it.
the dust, yeah.
That thing was hideously dirty.
Yeah. That's right, because it's black dust, too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So so that's all they really had for inculpatory.
Right.
That is pretty much it.
Remember, the first responding police officer had it nailed immediately. Like he knew, body's too dry, must be murder.
I find it interesting that some of the jurors thought that Ryan drank more than the 4 beers. Like this was a major point for them. They looked at him and they're like, "Yeah, there's no way that was just 4 beers.
Yeah.
He wasn't drunk in court. What was that based on?"
He just had a look of a guy who drinks more than 4 beers at a time.
The expert behavior analyst.
Right, but that really is interesting. Like even with 4 beers, the amount of alcohol that would have been in his system interacting with the adrenaline from finding his wife in that situation, his entire mental state would have been off. Just info dumping all over the place. The filter between what comes across your mind and what comes out of your mouth becomes very, very small. Very, very inability to stop that. So he says like, I just came up here from downstairs. Like that sounds like a little bit off. Like I was downstairs and then I came upstairs and I found her like this. That's what I might expect to hear if somebody's making it up. But he's like, I was downstairs and I came up here. How's the 911 dispatcher supposed to know where here is? But that's what he said. And like the info dumping he was doing, like it becomes much more reasonable when you think alcohol and adrenaline and the switching of stories. Like she's in the tub. If she's in the tub on her side and her face is pointed towards the den, then okay, yeah, she's face down. But wait, like she's face up because like her she's half over. Like, but that's where the confusion comes in his own mind. And now people who weren't there and don't know are making analyses of how he should have been acting in a calm and rational state. Like,
Yeah, the the jury really seemed judgmental. Like they did not like him sitting there with that face looking at things.
he has a face. I don't like it.
This whole Scary Ryan thing came out. The picture of him, it was his first day in custody or something. He looked like Scary Ryan, and he had the certain. He was wearing certain clothes that would prevent him from harming himself or something, and because of the color of that or something, it made him look scary. It showed the tattoos, I think, if I remember correctly, and so it just gave this impression of the Scary Ryan.
His tattoos. He must be guilty.
Right, exactly. This whole thought process, yeah. And
Everybody knows that bathtub cleaning murderers all have tattoos.
This is a common fact, right? That clean bathtubs. But he looked terrible, of course, looked disheveled from not sleeping and not eating well and everything. And his wife dying recently. So this whole idea of Scary Ryan, and they had this perception, perhaps, of who he must be based on his behavior and his appearance and so forth. Carrying a theme that carries out through this hearing, through this case.
So let's take a look at the factors on the side of the defense. Now, the first one's tricky because it could be used either way. But when the first responders arrived, they said the bathroom was not wet and it did not look like a bathtub struggle had taken place.
Right. I mean, the shampoo bottles were still on the sideboard near the front. There were towels on the towel racks. There wasn't any, there, of course, it wasn't moist at all. There was no excessive moisture in the bathroom anywhere. The floor wasn't soaking wet, but again, that's where the responding officers are like, the bathtub's not even, it's all completely dry. And those things are still there. If he pulled her out of this bathtub, they would have been knocked flying. Really?
Yeah, no matter what they found, they were going to say.
Right.
Yeah. They said that there was no sign of a struggle anywhere in the house. So not just bathtub struggles. No struggles.
No toilet struggles.
No sink
No
struggles.
sink struggles.
Right.
No sump pump struggles.
I mean, it's the prosecution really wanted they wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted it to be this massive violent struggle,
Right.
but there's no evidence of a massive violent struggle.
Their moist cake.
Right?
And
Yes,
eat it
they
too,
wanted to have their moist cake and eat it too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They wanted to have it right there, sitting there, beautiful on the plate in front of them, and also be in their belly at the same time. And
Not
it just
overly moist.
Doesn't work.
Right.
Doesn't
Right.
work.
And they said there were no wet towels anywhere in the house and no towels in the dryer.
Right.
So
The only towels they were able to locate were in their linen closet. Like they were folded up nicely, neatly. And then there was the one or two that were in the bathtub, the bathroom.
Yeah. So what they're saying is, it was dry, no bathtub struggle, and there's no way he could have dried it up.
Right.
'Cause-
But then the prosecution at trial would say, but he had a lot of time after he killed her to clean the whole thing up.
Maybe a hair dryer.
Like, unlike Bounty, the quicker picker upper, apparently, like he has a whole bunch of them. But they never even found like a trash bag full of old, wet, paper towels. Like there was no evidence of a cleanup, but the absence of water everywhere was their evidence that there had been a cleanup.
Right.
Because obviously it had to have been this violent struggle. Because there were these wounds here, and so like he pushed her down on the side of the tub, and the wounds came, the bruises came from him holding her down, and her chest being against the rim of the bathtub, and she was trying, the claw marks from her trying to get out and pushing against things, and I'm like, but if she was that animated and fighting for her life, one, there's no defensive wounds on him. There's no bruising, anything on him. If she was fighting that hard for her life, like there would have been. There was no splashed water anywhere.
Right.
Like if there was enough water for him to be holding her head under until she drowned, it would have gotten everywhere if she was fighting that hard.
Well, this takes us to the rest of these items. So Sarah did not have any obvious injury anywhere on her body at the scene. They found them later. Right. But whatever they found later. Yeah. She did not have any damage to her fingernails, which were done with a French manicure. Her toenails were painted pink. They were also undamaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, French manicure, not entirely brittle, but if she's fighting for her life, you'd expect there to be at least one chipped nail.
Yeah, they said the French manicure was painted on her natural nails, so they weren't like the plastic or whatever they are.
Yeah, no, they weren't like glued on. So like glued on ones, I'd expect them to be popped off really easy.
Right.
Like my sister and fiance both had those, and just boink. Like they go flying across the room at a moment's notice, and it's just like, oh, that went, damn, that's gone. But if it's paint on the actual nails, you'd expect there to be like chipping to the nail or chipping to the paint from all of the struggling and smashing against everything and knocking everything all over the place.
Yeah, I think she wouldn't have considered like her nails in that moment.
Right. Yeah.
No.
Like, oh, that was expensive.
Oh, I can't.
shouldn't fight against
I
him.
couldn't fight against this because my nails. Like, no. Like, not that,
And she was always described as like she would could take care of herself. You know, she wasn't going to put up with things from anybody. You know, which is, of course is not consistent with having no defensive wounds and so forth. Her body was. They described her body was also still warm when they got there, which gives credibility to either she had been alive recently or just recently got out of the water, perhaps. And so that doesn't really that helps Ryan's case, in my opinion, because she couldn't have been out there that long if her body was still warm. He couldn't have cleaned. He didn't have a lot of time to clean things up if the body was still warm.
If he took 2 hours to clean up the bathroom, which is what it would have taken to get it immaculate like that,
and leave no evidence,
and to leave no evidence, and to run the washer and dryer cycles to get the towels dry and folded and back in the cupboard, it would at least 2 hours for that to elapse. She wouldn't have been warm at that point. Like even if he'd put her in a warm bath to try and extend that time of her body being warm, that water would have cooled down and she would have cooled down by that time. But she was still warm.
Right. The other thing they said, there was a controversy about if her body had been moved or not. Ryan said that the officer came in first thing, I think he said first thing, moved the body. The officer said that he did not do that or did not remember doing that. But there were some stains on the ground, on the floor that, from what the defense said, that was consistent with her body being moved. But I think that the prosecution made a point, or tried to make a point, that they were not consistent with that. So I don't know that that really helps anything either way. But it's Ryan's word against the officer, and I think we know who's going to win in that case.
Yep. Also, her head was by the faucet end, which I think upset a lot of people. Like, who would take a bath with their head near the faucet end?
Yeah.
It's almost like somebody debating over like the toilet paper on the roll, like overhand or underhand.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh no, overhand. It's always overhand. It should always be.
that was
overhand.
also on The Simpsons, where the inspectors came to the house.
It's like, toilet paper roll in improper underhand fashion. No, the actual patent images for the toilet paper roll shows it in the overhand position. So that's the official way it should be. Always. You're a monster if you put it underhand.
Must be a killer if you're
just a psychopath.
The kind of person who cleans their bathtub.
Right. With tattoos.
With tattoo.
So we're getting a whole like a really good just a
Criminal profile.
psychological profile
Right.
of criminals who kill people.
Who kill in the bathtub.
Because
bathtub,
you know they clean their bathtub, they have tattoos, they hang their toilet paper in underhand fashion.
They take a bath the wrong way.
Right.
Or they make their victims take the bath.
They make the
out.
victim. Right. They make a victim.
And no, I can understand that though if you want to have the water running over top of you. I've seen some
be a
people
thing.
who like that.
Could be a thing.
Yeah, it's just a risk to hit your head. You know,
Yeah.
when-
But especially like she's described as a person of smaller stature. If she's a person of smaller stature and can sit with her, beside it with the faucet here, yeah, she might occasionally bump her shoulder into it. But especially if she falls asleep often, it's a good place to rest your head.
could be.
Not in the bathtub, though.
So here we get to the drying part of this. So an expert witness actually got a volunteer and had them climb in a bathtub, I guess we're in a bathing suit, whatever, and came out and they dried in 7 minutes under the same humidity levels or whatever. So
I mean, if I were to pursue expertise in drying time, that actually seems accurate. But yet 7 minutes to become dry. The 911 call lasted at least 5 before anyone showed up.
it was 6.5 when they
Yeah.
arrived. So
6.5 when they arrived. So not excessively moist would be a good description of something that has 30 seconds left on the drying timer.
Right. Right.
yeah. As you mentioned, Ryan, no injuries. He was actually wearing only boxer briefs, so they could see pretty much his whole body.
Yeah.
Nothing. There was no history of domestic violence. Good marriage by all accounts.
So not only did he get all the towels dried, he washed his own clothes and dried them and put them away. Before he called 911.
Very industrious. Sarah did not have a life insurance policy, although she applied for one, and he might have thought that it was active. It was 2 weeks before she died. She had the history of sleepiness, stomach aches, headaches. She would see spots in her vision, and it was blurry. And the sleepiness disrupted her daily life.
Yeah.
She could not make it through an entire movie without falling asleep.
Right.
Her friends nicknamed her Sleeper, so they're a pretty creative group.
Very creative. I think her family knew that too. Like she would go to family events and they'd make sure that at least one chair had a pillow in it. They knew like she was going to fall asleep. They knew it.
Yeah.
And if there's a real serious neurological disorder going on, it could really inhibit a lot of the regular autonomic functions that might happen. And one of the people testified about drowning. A person falling asleep in the bathtub, they go under as soon as the water, goes up over the nose and starts to be inhaled. The body reacts. The nervous system goes, "No, that's not right," and it wakes you up, and you come up coughing. That's why I say it's almost impossible for that to happen. But in case of Whitney Houston, she was so overly medicated, shall we say, so many substances and tranquilizers in her system that autonomic function wasn't active. So she did drown. If Sarah had some sort of medical condition that could cause that same kind of effect when she's sleeping, it's absolutely possible for her to fall asleep and drown. Not to mention, what if it was something microscopic that you didn't see, like, I don't know, an aneurysm in the wrong spot in the brain? It was one small blood vessel just and dead.
Could also be a seizure. Yeah. 1% of people will suffer a seizure at least one point in their lifetime. Yeah.
But since drowning is a diagnosis by exclusion, if you don't find that one piece of evidence for like an aneurysm or seizure, then you don't say, well, it was an aneurysm or seizure, therefore not drowning. And you go, well, if I don't have that evidence, it must be drowning.
Right.
But if you didn't find it, it just means you didn't look hard enough. But that's why they want to test the DNA,
Right.
See if it's possible for this medical condition, any medical condition,
Right.
to have been existing, a genetically based medical condition.
Try to find some more information. Right.
Yeah.
Also, according to that Ryan Whitmer website, apparently, according to that anyway, there's 300,000 unexplained deaths in the U.S. every year. So it could have been just something unknown, perhaps, a condition unknown, or something completely accidental that they wouldn't be able to detect. I guess there's infinite possibilities, but obviously nobody really knows for sure.
He was offered a plea deal, lesser charge and maximum of 5 years. He would have been out by now.
Yeah.
Almost certainly.
And he said no. He's like, I'm not going to plead to something I didn't do.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you would think that if he did it, he would, I mean, jeopardy's attached. Once he pleaded guilty, he could confess, and there's nothing they could do.
Right.
But no, he said no, and that was it.
And that is a really hard deal to turn down.
Yeah.
But that, to me, I can understand why he would. I mean, they're willing to drop first-degree murder down to something for just 5 years. They must have nothing. And they really had nothing.
They had nothing.
Like, their entire case was proof by absence.
Yeah.
Well, it's, really seems like he's just trying to save his name. Do you you pick freedom in 5 years, or somewhat freedom? Obviously, he's never going to be able to fully get his name back. His good name, so to speak. Or do you decide to fight for it, right? And I could understand in a situation like this, if he is in fact innocent, I would want to fight as well and be like, I didn't do this, and I'm gonna try to prove it, even if it lands me in jail because I didn't actually prove it. Yeah, but it is an alluring thing to be like, wow, I could be out in 5 years if I just say I did it, whether I did it or not. I mean, that's obviously there's very difficult choice there, but I certainly can't blame him for wanting to fight for it. I don't know. I don't see why you wouldn't, assuming if he was innocent.
Now, the third jury, they said, or members of that jury said that Ryan was a punk, and they could tell he was guilty by looking at him. I guess it was one of the jurors said this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that settles it.
All right. Case closed.
I saw him walk in. Knew he was guilty.
Case closed. Go home.
How is that juror allowed to continue being a juror? That is one of the problems we do have in the jury system, is that there are people who make up their minds before they come in.
Yeah.
There are people who say, if this person's on trial, if they were arrested and they're on trial, it's because they did something. So it's obvious. Right. Innocent people don't get arrested.
Well, that brings me to this point. This is something else the juror said. The evidence did not prove his innocence. So they don't understand the burden of proof.
But they're not understanding what the point, like, innocent until proven guilty, not guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah. They're also very mad and upset that he didn't testify on his own behalf.
Because that always works out.
Yeah, because that always works out.
But, judges specifically say the choice not to testify cannot be used against the defendant.
Right. I forget what case it was, but when the lawyer brought up, like, why won't you talk? And then that was a problem too, right?
That was a young lady who allegedly murdered her mother. I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Nora?
Was
Yeah,
it?
was it Nora?
Something?
Yeah, I think something like that.
I can't
I don't remember. I don't remember who exactly it was, but yeah, there was a mistrial declared because she said that because the prosecutor in her closing arguments like, why won't she tell us? Why won't she tell us? She's pushing that button, and yeah, that the jury's not supposed to consider a defendant's silence as a evidence of their guilt, because it's not. Lawyers tell you not to do that. They tell you not to testify in your own defense. Because a lot of times, especially if people are making judgments about you just sitting there, you get on the stand and say, and have an accent that they don't expect to come out of your mouth, you're going to be going to jail. And even if the evidence overwhelmingly shows that you were, 3 states away, they're going to go, I don't like his accent. Who's Cal?
Yeah.
Guilty. Get him out of here.
Yeah, there's a lot of risk with testifying. I think some types of cases, defendants probably should testify, like every now and then, like in a self-defense case. There's a sense that juries want to hear
Right.
that you were scared. And
And in some cases that can work. It worked for Candy Montgomery.
wow, it really did.
Yeah. Really did. It works for people, especially in those self-defense cases. But this wasn't a self-defense case, and there was literally no evidence being presented that was evidence of anything. It was all evidence of absence, and like this whole case was diagnosis by exclusion. Like he must have killed her because there's no other explanation for why she's dead.
Right.
That's what it boils down to.
That is what they were doing. So one of my favorite juror statements from the third jury. This one. You just can't make this stuff up. This juror thought that the fact that the dog can be heard barking in the beginning of the 911 call was incredibly important. He said, it was a male juror, he said this proved Sarah was already on the bathroom floor, which contradicted Ryan's story. The juror claimed that the dog would not have barked if Sarah was in the bathtub, because that is a natural place for a master to be.
This goes above and beyond behavioral expert. This is like the dog whisperer.
This is the dog whisperer behavior expert. Like we're going beyond just looking at him.
Right.
We're looking at the dog. But one of the other jurors in the third trial said when they were showing the autopsy photos in the courtroom, he's like, he didn't react like a normal person whose wife is dead should have. And I'm like, okay, this is where it's a really frustrating point for me, because in this trial, the third trial, there's been 2 mistrials already. This is a fresh start. The jury's not supposed to consider that there were any previous trials, but they're judging his behavior in this trial, even though he's been through this twice before. He's been exposed to those photos over and over again. And now he's just kind of not responding. We talked about that at the beginning. Like he's just not responding to that. But I can't fault the juror for not considering the other 2 trials because they're not supposed to. The problem is always in that he's not reacting like a normal person would in this situation. How would a normal person react?
What would an innocent reaction look like?
Right. What is an innocent reaction? If he did that, you'd be like, he was acting too much. It was too dramatic. It was over the top.
Yeah.
Right. And there's like just one tear rolling down. It's like, well, that's a suspicious tear. Does he have something in his eye? I don't like it. Because they'd already made up their minds at that point, some of those jurors.
If they're going to dogs for the answers,
Because there's and that wasn't even evidence that was presented for them by the prosecutor. They were doing basically their own interpretations at that point. But this was like the first trial was declared a mistrial because the jurors were doing. Some of the female jurors did their own drying tests. Like jurors are not supposed to do their own tests on things. They're supposed to take the evidence that's presented to them and use their judgment on that. But some of the women, they went home and they got in a bath and then they got out and they timed how long it took their hair to dry and for them to dry. And then they came back and said, oh, he's guilty.
And I think they shared the information.
Yeah, they shared the guilty information with all of the other jurors. They
jurors,
say, "Oh, I did this last night, and this blah blah. This is what I found." So blah,
and somebody
blah,
else, oh, I did that too, and this was my result.
blah. Yeah, but they acquitted him on the first charge, and then came back and said, "Yeah, he did it on the second charge of the second degree murder."
Right.
And then Ryan went to jail. They went to prison for a couple of years before they came back and said, before they found out that this happened. And then they were like, "Oh, this happened? Jurors aren't supposed to do that. That's juror misconduct, mistrial." So the judge said, "Okay, we're not going to throw out the first one, first degree murder acquittal. We'll keep this for the second one." And then the second juror hung. And they couldn't make a decision. They were deadlocked.
Mm-hmm.
So mistrial. And then third trial, we get the dog whisperer jurors and the people, the instinctual justice driven people. Like they walk in a room, I can feel the justice is being done.
I think that's another branch
There's a
of
guilty
government.
person here.
I think that's another branch of government is
CSP.
superior behavior analysis, being able to determine somebody's guilt just by looking at them.
Oh yeah, no, the government uses that all the time.
Right.
The MGK, like the Majestic 12 stuff, and the Men Who Stare at Goats, like they've been using all sorts of psychic stuff forever. They've got people just walk in a room. There's a guilty person here. I can feel the guilt. It's surprising that more police forces don't actually have those people on staff. Like they just walk into a scene. This was a murder.
I can feel it. With this,
But it's essentially what happened in this case.
Yeah.
with this idea of jurors reading body language and trying to analyze somebody's behavior and tone of voice and so forth, I wonder what it would be like, or how this could be done, or if it would even make sense for some kind of blind trials to be happening. Like when the jury couldn't actually see, they could hear everything, of course, but they couldn't actually see the defendant, and therefore couldn't see reactions or lack of reactions. I'm sure that they would still try to analyze voice type things, like, it's the wrong tone of voice for this situation, whatever.
Frosted penalty box. A frosted penalty box. That sounds like a cereal. Frosted
Sounds like a hockey
boxes.
game.
No, but you have a box with frosted glass. Yeah. You can see the defendant come in, sit in. The defendant can be there, viewing everything that's happening, so they're aware of what's going on. They can help with their legal team, but the jury then can't see that person's
or
reactions.
certain mirror or something.
I think they should be silhouetted so they can make little animals.
Yeah. Like, hey,
And
jurors.
then I did this.
Jurors.
And then I did
Bunny
this.
rabbit.
That's the only evidence they can show. If it can show up as a shadow, that's the only evidence they could show, right?
Wasn't the Austin Powers movies that made good use of the silhouette a few times?
Yeah. It's always something sexual too. I mean, it just always is whenever they do something with that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not just with Austin Powers. Every time they use that in a movie, it turns into something sexual all the time.
Yeah, it's never wholesome.
Right.
Hot Shots
Right.
Part
right.
2 actually did a really great one, like
Right.
where they ended up doing like fighting with shadow puppets on the wall. Like that was hilarious. Like it started off with like the sword fight battle going back and forth, and then it was just like.
There was another spoof movie or something like that where the two people were sword fighting, I think, and then all you saw was the shadows, and then they just gave up, and they're like patting each other on the back and walking
Robin
away.
Hood Men in Tights.
Was that Men in Tights?
It was Men in Tights. Yeah.
So there's some good use of it, no doubt about that.
There is some good use of it. That's not too dirty, but it's few and far between. Usually the silhouettes are definitely things like Austin Powers and pulling things out of the bag.
Yeah, right. But I really think that somebody, some county somewhere, a state, should entertain the idea of people just not being able to see each other. Like maybe that might take away some of this, because clearly it's a big problem.
I mean, like the jury is supposed to be judging and looking at the evidence for what happened then. Yeah. At the moment of a crime happening. They're not supposed to be judging what this person is doing right here, right now. But a lot of the juries spend their time staring at that defendant. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, if you got the expert over here on the stand testifying and you're looking over here at the defendant, you're not actually paying attention to what the expert is saying.
Maybe they should have like they have the lineups where they have usually 6 people, have 6 defendants, and you have to give a verdict for each one.
Right.
Just based on appearance.
It's like we don't know which one's the actual defendant. One of them actually is. The other 5 are innocent.
You get to choose.
You get to choose which one, and just have like actors who will react in different ways.
Right.
What?
That's some BS. I'm gonna have to get you into contempt of court. I'll be good. And then the one who just falls on the floor crying hysterically when the things come up the other end of the spectrum. It'd be ridiculous, but that could throw jurors off. They could figure it out, but
that could be a game show. Like somebody gets surprising news, and this panel of people has to decide which one's, the actual person in the wrong or something.
I think what I would have liked here, of course you can't do this because this was a real trial, but I think they should have put the dog on the stand and really tried to sell it as if this was like, no, this is 911 call. The dog's now a witness. Right. I have the feeling this third jury would have been like, let's see what the dog.
That's a great idea.
We believe the dog. Like they got their field trip to the house.
Right.
They got to hear the dog. They got to see pictures of the dog, and they're like, yeah, that dog. That's a smart dog. That dog obviously knew that its master was on the floor.
The star witness. It probably would have been the star witness.
I don't know. My dog barks at everything. If I go in the shower, my dog starts barking. Like that's a place where a master should be. A natural place for a master should be. Right.
Well,
but if I go in there,
needs to understand that.
My dog starts barking because my dog hates the hairdryer, and he's learned that if I go take a shower, I'm going to come out and use the hairdryer. So he starts barking because I went into the bathroom to take a shower.
I was just thinking, the person who's in charge of the evidence locker at the police station or precinct or something was probably pretty mad when they wheeled in a bathtub and like, hey, you guys got space for this? And like,
where am I supposed to put this?
They're looking at something a bathtub size. Like, what am I supposed to do with this?
You take that down to the impound right now because that's where they store the cars. And you ain't put it in here. No, it's evidence.
I imagine that was a bad day for the person in evidence. Yeah.
Just fighting that tub in the court and everything, bringing that in and out. There was another...
How am I supposed to lift this with nitrile gloves?
There was another well-known case where they brought in a whole bed, like a queen or a king-size bed, and reenacted like a homicide that took place. Seems like a lot of work.
Yeah.
Oh, there was one out of California that they brought in. They got the railing from a balcony. Brought the whole railing in.
Oh my gosh!
And set it up like at the right height and everything. This big construct over top of it, so that you could see the jury could see what this thing looked like. Because supposedly the woman had been sitting on it and then toppled off to her death. So they're like, we want to show you how high this is, so that to prove that it couldn't have been this. The guy who was accused of murder in that case was actually acquitted of that. As the prosecutor said that there was a struggle and he had sexually assaulted her in the room, but there was no evidence of that in the room. There was just some of his clothing articles left over. So the jury was like, we didn't see evidence of a struggle, so we couldn't buy the prosecution's case.
Mm-hmm. Well, prosecutors definitely get creative.
I bet Ryan wishes he had that jury.
I think any jury, but
the ones he had,
the number 3 in particular, right? I think number 2 was his big chance to be acquitted. That was
but those holdouts were just.
It's unbelievable.
The interesting thing is, like, during his first trial, public opinion was on his side. Like, there was a lot of people. The Free Ryan website went up and became a big thing. And that's actually one of the reasons I think the third trial got where it got, was because of that website. It got a lot of support. Dateline was following the case. They got a lot of support through it. But Ryan met a couple of people because of that website. Right. And they were people of the female persuasion, and he started talking to them quite a bit. And one of them, that was the big thing for the third trial. So after that second mistrial, prosecutors were thinking about not retrying him. They're like, I don't think we're going to get anything on this. We need something to come forward.
Right.
We need new evidence to build this on. And they found it. And yet one of the women that he'd met on that website came forward and said, he confessed to me.
Yeah,
He said he did it.
she had a very interesting history. Convictions for crimes of dishonesty, habitual offender status, bipolar disorder, and addicted to narcotics for years. She was on methadone for years. She waited 6 months before coming forward. But still, just
Her excuse for that was that, I thought the second trial was going to convict him. So it wasn't until after that it was declared a mistrial that I realized I had to do something. Plus, he threatened me. Why don't you lead with the threatened part?
That seems most important for
If
your
you lead
case.
with the threatened part, then they put him in jail instead of allowing bail, and then you don't have to worry about it. But she also admitted to having memory problems. She couldn't remember specifics. She didn't remember how long the phone call lasted or when it happened until the prosecutor gave her the paper that said when it was and how long it lasted.
Yeah, it's one of those, it's a witness who I would think the jury kind of dismissed, but who knows with this jury, like.
The defense brought in another woman that he met who said that she was on the phone with him 6 minutes before the call that was made. This was the supposed confession. 6 minutes. And that phone call from the phone records had lasted more than 3 hours. Now, the confession witness said that he was drunk, like obviously drunk and slurring his words and very upset. But the other woman said, like, we'd been on the phone for 3 hours and he hadn't been drinking and he didn't sound slurred at all. When he hung up 6 minutes before he made that other phone call.
And in the confession, Sarah was supposed to be angry and leaving.
Yeah.
Right. So she was really mad, and that was it. She was going to leave. But you know what? I just want to take a bath before I leave in an angry mood.
Right.
And then he just snapped, and then he hit her or pushed her, and her head hit the wall. And then he couldn't remember anything. This is the supposed confession, except that the medical examiners found no evidence of trauma to the back of her head or to her brain. In the back of her head, there was no damage to the skull or scalp to indicate that there had been any blow to the head at all.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that the prosecution would want to bring this witness in.
Yeah.
Like just work with the evidence you have. Don't make up evidence.
And that's really what it comes. I think it was made up. I think that she had a wish fulfillment fantasy. She wanted to see this guy. She wanted to be in a relationship with him, but he wasn't willing to be in a romantic relationship with her. And she found out that he was talking to other women the same way, he'd met the same way. And so she was going to make him pay for it.
Sometimes it pays just to lay low when you're charged with murder.
I think it's most of the time.
Yeah. It seems like he was just taking an unnecessary chance, and he had bad luck.
Yeah. Although, when Scott Peterson tried to lay low in several hundred miles away from where it was, people were freaking out, like, where'd he go? He ran. Where is he?
Well, you can't do anything right.
Right.
You can do everything wrong, but you can't do anything right in those kind of situations.
When the public, especially in the area around where he lived, when they found out about these other women that he had been talking to after his wife had been killed, and right around or after the first trial was concluded, when they found out he was talking to these women, public opinion turned on him. Like there was one public disc jockey on the radio in that area who had been a staunch supporter of him from before the first trial all the way through, and then when that testimony came up, he turned immediately. It was like, I can't believe I supported this guy for this long.
Yeah, that was his marigolds, right? When Michael Morton case, the
Oh yeah,
It was the Marigolds.
that turned the whole case.
He took a weed whacker to the Marigolds.
Yeah,
What does that prove? That he
guilty by landscaping.
Guilt by landscaping. Apparently, this is guilt by dryness.
Right. Guilt by clean tubs.
Yeah.
Guilt by
Don't clean
dry
your tub.
towels.
If you don't want to be convicted of murder, don't clean your tub.
Right. And everyone knows that. That's innocence 101. Right.
And if you got to cover it up after that, make sure you flip the toilet paper to the proper overhand position.
That's right.
And cover up your tattoos.
Right.
Don't let them see the tattoos.
And do not let that dog bark.
Oh no. That dog needs to be quiet.
Yeah,
Bribe it if you have to.
911 calls. There's no adrenaline going at all, ever. So make sure that you're completely aware of your surroundings and where your dog's at.
Be completely calm
Right.
on the 911 cape. Don't freak out, but
consult a lawyer first so you know what to say.
Yeah, have a little bit of a freak out tone in your voice, but don't give out too much information. Just like be concerned. And maybe emergency concerned, but not like freaking out. And definitely don't drink 4 beers beforehand. Because everybody's going to know you drank more than that.
Maybe every time you call 911 and there's been some kind of murder or somebody's hurt or something, maybe it should immediately connect you to a lawyer first and be like, oh yeah, I'm not really sure what I should or should not say. And you have to run through it first. And then you get on the phone with the dispatcher so you know exactly maybe the right words to say or not say. Maybe that's the only way things can work.
In some areas, you can text 911.
Yeah.
Right, that's being adopted. I don't know if that's everywhere, but so like what emojis would be?
Well, I'm sorry. If you're using emojis in a 911 text, obviously it's not an emergency. So they're just going to dismiss you outright, especially if it's like an eggplant emoji. They're not going to appreciate that.
I don't know. I don't know if they have a murder emoji. Maybe they have to make it. If you're going to text 911.
There is skull and crossbones.
Okay, well, there you go. I picture one with a knife or something. Like,
I believe there is a knife.
is there?
Yeah.
Well, I think somebody holding a knife is the only appropriate.
I mean, the problem is you have to really look through all of your emojis to try and find the right ones.
Right.
And there's a ton of them. It's not like you have a 26-character keyboard with letters on it that you could use to type out a message. You have to search through all of your emojis to find the right ones.
To find actually how you can express yourself.
Right, exactly. That's how you text to 911.
I liked your sarcasm there. It's not like you have 26 characters. Not like we have a language for this.
Yeah, it's not like in English we have an alphabet you could use to create words.
All right. So final thoughts on Ryan Whitmer.
Well, I see this dripping with reasonable doubt, and of course I wasn't on the jury, and I'd like to think that I would be able to see more clearly than these juries did, but who knows? But it seems to me that it's just reasonable doubt everywhere, and there seems to be no strong case in any of the trials. Certainly nothing that would lead me to believe that he might have done it, or that there would be that I could reasonably suspect that he had done it. In reality, separate from that, I don't think there's evidence that he did it anyway. Like I can't find a scenario where he could have done it and everything been this clean and well thought out. So there's not even like sure, he could have done it, I guess, but there's not even anything I can point to that would be like, other than just him and Sarah being the only two home, other than the dog. There's nothing else I can point to that would say, yeah, I think he could have done it because of this. I don't see anywhere where that could have happened.
And they didn't really investigate the dog, though.
Well, of course, that's the problem. That's a problem.
The dog holds her underwater while she's struggling. The paw print. Yeah, that's where the claw prints come from, right? And then the water gets everywhere. The dog just rolls around in the water, runs outside, shakes itself off, runs back in. No need for towels.
Or licks it up or something. Yeah.
No need for towels. And that's while Ryan's downstairs, just kind of like paying attention to the Bengals game, drinking his beers. You know.
Switches it to the Olympics, and then the dog comes down and he's like, what happened?
What? I don't know what.
A Lassie situation. Yeah. You say something's wrong upstairs in the bathtub?
Huh? My take on this one is I'm going to make a claim that I've only made in one other video, and that was the Jeff Pelly video. Like, I am 100% convinced that he's not guilty. of this. There is literally no evidence. Again, every time we got somebody who was absolutely convinced, it came down to like nothing, like literally nothing. Like the first officer responding, he said, "This is murder from the door." Why? Because it's too dry. And you get the prosecutors like, it had to have been murder. Why? Because he cleaned it up.
Yeah.
How do you know he cleaned it up? It had to have been this massive struggle. Well, if it was a massive struggle, he had to have cleaned it up, but it's dry. Okay. Well, then how is her body still warm? How is her hair still damp?
They started with the conclusion.
Yeah, they started with the conclusion that it was murder and didn't allow for any other possibility, like a natural causes or a medical disorder that caused her to actually drown in a bathtub. They said, no, it's murder. I went into it looking from the door. And because Ryan said he was the only other person home and 90% of the time the husband did it, is the cop statistic, they focused on him from minute one.
Yeah. The prosecution said that he did it, but they didn't know how he did it. Right. That right there seems like reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
So we're just going to, like, he must have found some way? Like, that's their case? Well, he must have found some way.
Right. And then they go on for 3 trials and never prove any way that he actually could have done it.
Mm.
I mean, they were trying to wrink every last drop out of this case. Like,
No pun intended.
Yeah, no pun.
Oh, actually, probably might have
intended.
intended, yeah.
Pun absolutely intended, yeah. And it was rough. I think they were. It
was dripping with reasonable doubt.
Absolutely was dripping with reasonable doubt. Yeah, it was positively moist with reasonable doubt.
Not overly moist.
Yeah.
Not overly moist, but
actually it was.
Just
It was
moist. Yeah,
very moist.
It was submerged in reasonable doubt.
There you go. The name of the book. There you go.
Yeah, submerged. Yeah, that was the name of the book. Yeah, this case just, I'm astounded, and just gobsmacked by the fact that he was convicted on the 3rd trial. And it all comes down to his likability at that point. Like, there's no evidence. Like I said several times, this is a case of absence of evidence. The prosecutor's whole conclusion is there's an absence of evidence, and that means that he did it. But in the scientific community, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Right? It's not evidence of anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they concluded that she was murdered. She was drowned. And he was the only one in the house that they thought could have done it. That was, I think, that was the beginning and the end of the case. Like, that was it. Yeah. I think that, like the staircase, the Michael Peterson, or I think, they were the only 2 in the house, and his wife was dead on the staircase. Like, he did it. Right? That was I think they never really explored the medical possibilities. And did something happen where she could have drowned by accident? Nope. 2 people in the house, 1 dead. That's it.
Yeah. They said from the door, they said, this is murder. And then that's what they went with. And they started with the conclusion and then tried to fit evidence to that conclusion. And when they couldn't fit evidence to the conclusion, they fit the absence of evidence to the conclusion. And like, that's where we get into like conspiracy theory mindsets, right? Like, we see it all the time with conspiracy theorists. They get their conclusion and they say, this is the fact. Anything that challenges that, they pivot to something else to make it so.
Yeah. If there's certain cases that really can create doubt in the criminal justice system, this is one of them.
Yeah.
This was a prosecution and a jury coming together there's no safety. No safety worked in this case.
Yeah.
It's very frightening. Yeah, I look at this case like, for me, 2 people in the house, 1 dead. That is pretty convincing. So I kind of weigh on like, in terms of balance of probability, I think he probably did it. But there's no way it's close to reasonable doubt. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. There's just no way. And I'm still like, even with balance of probability, I'm still kind of on the fence. I don't know. It is the easiest explanation, right? He drowned her. It's easy.
there's no one. There's no evidence of it. There's also no motive.
Well, I mean, she was dead of drowning. That's she was dead of drowning. There was two people in the house. That was the whole state's case, right?
Yeah, but that can happen.
It can happen. Yeah, I mean, it could have been murder. It might not have been, but I think look at it like at some point, it's kind of strange that she drowned in the bathtub. Something had to cause that.
Right.
What would have caused that under normal circumstances if somebody had no substances and no medical explanation? Someone doing it.
But what wasn't explored was medical explanations.
Right.
And there's ample evidence that there absolutely is likelihood that there's a medical explanation for it.
Well, her sleepiness situation, if we just knew what that was all about,
right.
But they haven't done the testing. Right. So there's a lot of blank areas in this case. We just can't see. We don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting that there wasn't as much look at that. And one of the things that's being seen more in medical research nowadays, and I think it's just really starting to be realized, is that the heart is different between men and women, and that a heart attack in a woman may present and have evidence as very different from a man's. It may not be the same. And in pathology and forensic pathology, if they don't know that, and they're looking for the classic signs of a heart attack in the heart, that would appear in a man, but might not appear in a female heart. Mm-hmm. They might miss the signs in the female heart. Mm-hmm. And then they say, there's no heart attack. Well, what if the being tired, being sleepy, having vision issues and blurriness in the vision, some of these things could be indicative of congestive heart failure or something similar to that. And if she had a heart attack that was so low grade that it just kind of stopped instead of causing a massive reaction, mm-hmm. that left no evidence, like you would no evidence that you would see on a classic heart attack, the pathologist then doesn't know to look for that. Right. And again, they exclude heart attack from it, and therefore we're left with drowning.
Right. Yeah, well, I think too the defense conceded that she did not fall asleep. Right, the defense said that it had to be a medical mystery. So that was a tough position, especially with this particular jury. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think they would have believed a dog on the stand. Yeah. I think that's where we were.
Probably.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely a lot of reasonable doubt. A frightening conviction. But it would be very interesting to know what really happened.
Yeah.
All right. Unfortunately, I don't think we're ever really going to know.
No.
Because again, there were only two people in the house, mm-hmm. and the dog.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the likelihood that they're going to release that DNA, Sarah's DNA, or test it rather, maybe is kind of low, that they will test that DNA and try to see if there was a medical issue at all.
I think an exhumation might be the other way, but
I think she was cremated.
Was she?
Pretty sure. Pretty sure they said that in the book.
Oh,
no, I don't recall. If she was cremated, then there's absolutely no way we'd ever know.
Right.
If she was buried, then exhumation might be able to shed some light on things, but
yeah,
we're not going to know.
I think they said that she didn't have a will, so they didn't know exactly what she would have wanted. But I think Ryan, she had given the indication that she wanted to be cremated or something like that. In the short time that they were together. I think that's what it had said. Which, if that's the case, I'm surprised that in some of the hearing that the lawyers didn't make a bigger deal of that. Like, oh, he tried to hide evidence, mm-hmm. by having her cremated.
All right. So we'll wrap up this case here. Any thoughts for items, Mr.
Oh, well, there's a bathtub, mini bathtub, absolutely.
Yeah.
See, or something that looks moist, like a moist towel, like a
moist towelette.
A moist towelette. Yeah.
There you go.
You can do that. Yeah, moist towelette or a bathtub. I think I know what's going to be picked, but
we'll put them both out there for a vote.
Yeah.
And please put any comments in the comment section. We read every one. We appreciate them. Any ideas for videos or anything else. We will talk to you again soon with another murder part and with more alien lizard humanoids episodes. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.